Once upon a time, in a forgotten village tucked between silent hills and dusty fields, there lived a boy named Arin. His world was a little mud hut that smelled of damp soil and hopelessness, a world where mornings were not welcomed with laughter, but with the cracks of responsibilities pressing down on a young pair of shoulders. Arin was thin, almost fragile, with eyes that once carried dreams but were now heavy with exhaustion. He lived with his mother, who struggled daily to feed him a simple meal, and with every passing day, poverty tightened its claws around their lives like an unforgiving winter. Society had already written Arin's destiny before he even learned to write his own name. Villagers whispered that children of such poor families rarely rose above their circumstances. Teachers brushed past him as if he were invisible. Some boys mocked him for his torn clothes, while others laughed at his inability to afford books. Their words did not simply touch him, they pierced through him, slowly draining the spark he once carried. Yet deep within, in the quietest corner of his heart, there once lived a dream to study, to become someone who could lift his mother out of despair, someone who could walk with his head high. But life had a way of dimming that dream. Every torn shoe, every night when hunger kept him awake, every moment he watched his mother break under the weight of hopelessness. These things carved fear into his bones. Arin began losing not just opportunities, but himself. His confidence quietly slipped away, unnoticed by the world, but deeply felt by his own trembling spirit. The true breaking point arrived on a scorching afternoon when Arin, carrying his worn-out school bag, was summoned by his teacher. The class had just finished a weekly test, and the results hung before him like judgment waiting to fall. As the papers were distributed, giggles and snickers echoed around the room. When Arin's paper reached his desk, a large red mark stared back. Another failure, another blow to a weakening heart. The teacher looked at him with thinly veiled irritation, as if his very existence was an inconvenience. In front of the entire class, comments were thrown like stones about his poor performance, about his appearance, about how some people were simply not meant to become anything. Those words dug themselves into the deepest corners of Arin's mind. The laughter of his classmates slapped against the hollow walls of his chest. In that moment, Arin felt the fragile pieces of his self-belief crumble. He tried. Oh, he tried. Night after night, he sat under the dim light of a cracked lamp, tracing letters on torn pages, struggling against the heaviness in his heart. But failure became a familiar visitor. His mind, exhausted and overwhelmed, began to whisper its own cruel lies, that he was not capable, that he was not meant for greatness, that life would always be a shadow he could never step out of. The external world mocked him. The internal world defeated him. Arin stood in the middle, pulled from both sides, breaking quietly. Every day he walked home with slumped shoulders, dust clinging to his feet, tears clinging to his lashes. He felt himself sinking into darkness, slowly losing the battle he was fighting within. He felt forgotten by the world, and worse, forgotten by himself. One evening, after another discouraging day, Arin wandered near the small, nearly abandoned railway station at the edge of the village. The sunset painted everything in a lonely shade of orange, and the empty platform felt like a place where discarded dreams came to rest. He sat there quietly, head lowered, staring at his torn shoes that barely held together. The silence was thick, almost suffocating. From the corner of the platform emerged an elderly station master, a man with tired eyes but a strange warmth in his presence. His uniform was faded, his steps slow, but something about him carried a lifetime of wisdom. He walked past Arin at first, but stopped after a few steps, as if sensing the quiet storm inside the boy. He approached and sat beside him. No unnecessary questions, no judgment, just a gentle presence that felt like a much-needed shelter. After a long moment, in a voice softened by years of witnessing many broken souls pass by, he delivered a single line that felt like it was carved from truth itself. The mind you carry is the architect of the life you will build. Arin lifted his gaze slowly. Those words seeped into his spirit like warm sunlight touching frozen skin. The station master, noticing the boy's trembling hands, reached into his small wooden office and returned with an old diary. It was nothing fancy, its edges worn, its pages yellow, but it carried a certain dignity, as if it had held many stories before arriving in Arin's hands. The diary felt strangely alive, almost symbolic, like a new beginning disguised in old pages. "This," the old man said softly, "is where you will rebuild yourself." And then he walked away, leaving Arin alone with a diary that suddenly felt heavier than its weight. Not heavy with burden, but with possibility. The old diary became more than paper bound together. It became Arin's first true companion. Its faded cover and slightly torn spine held a quiet strength that mirrored his own. Whenever he opened it, the yellow pages seemed to whisper invitations for change, urging him to write, to dream again, to believe again. With every stroke of his pencil, the diary absorbed his fears, his failures, his whispered hopes. It held his trembling handwriting like a mother holding a child's fragile fingers, guiding them forward with gentle assurance. Arin began writing his thoughts, small goals, small promises. At first, it was messy. At first, it was hesitant. But the diary did not judge. It simply received. That diary became the turning point, the symbol his subconscious would never forget. A reminder that even in the darkest night, a spark can be held, protected, and nurtured into a flame. The transformation did not happen overnight. It began like the first weak rays of dawn after a long winter. Soft, timid, almost unnoticed. But it began. Arin started waking earlier than the sun. He sat with the diary each morning, writing down small tasks, reading for an hour, practicing questions, learning new words. These were small steps, but they carried determination that had been missing for years. Slowly, His shoulders lifted. Slowly, his back straightened. Slowly, the fear that once dominated his mind began to loosen its grip. The villagers still whispered. Classmates still mocked. Life still tested him at every corner. But Arin's inner world was no longer collapsing. For the first time, he was fighting back, not with anger, but with discipline, with focus, with belief. He studied under trees when there was no electricity. He revised while helping his mother cook. He repeated answers to himself while carrying water jars from the village well. His environment did not change. He did. His eyes, once dull, now flickered with a fire people had never seen in him. His walk became purposeful. When teachers spoke, he listened with a hunger to learn. When problems confused him, he stayed longer, trying, failing, trying again. The world still doubted him, but each day, Arin grew a little taller in spirit. His diary filled page after page, goals, notes, mistakes, achievements. Every page was a promise he was keeping to himself. A year passed, then 2, then 3. Arin's results began to improve. First small victories, then bitter ones. A scholarship, a state-level ranking. Opportunities that once seemed impossible now stood at his doorstep, waiting. He eventually left the village to continue his education in the city, a world he once believed was not built for people like him. But now, he walked through crowded streets with confidence. He became a top student, later a respected engineer, and eventually a leader in his field. Arin rose, not by miracle, but by rebuilding himself from the ashes of his past. Years later, when Arin returned to his village, he stepped down from the bus as a completely transformed man. His eyes searched for the familiar dusty roads, the old banyan tree, the quiet corners where he once hid his tears. Everything looked smaller now, not because it had changed, but because he had grown. He made his way toward the railway station, the place where the turning point of his life had begun. But when he reached the platform, he felt a strange stillness. The wooden office was closed. The bench where he once sat with trembling hands looked lonely and worn out. And when he asked a passerby about the old station master, he learned that the man had passed away years ago. The news struck him like an unexpected wave of emotion. Arin sat on the same bench, holding the old diary he still carried with him. A diary now filled completely, each page etched with his journey from darkness to light. He placed the diary on the bench beside him, as if sharing his life's victories with the man who had sparked them. His eyes filled, not with sadness, but with gratitude so deep it trembled in his breath. He looked toward the horizon where the sun was setting, painting the sky the same shade of orange from that day years ago. The station was quiet, but Arin felt the old man's presence in the wind, in the silence, in the warmth of memory. The place had changed, the people had changed, but the lesson he received here, the lesson that reshaped his destiny, remained immortal. Arin whispered a silent thank you to the universe, to fate, to the mentor who had believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. The ache in his chest was not pain. It was closure. It was fulfillment. It was the realization that even when the guide disappears, their light continues to guide the paths they ignite. He stood up, taller than ever before, and walked away, not as the poor, helpless boy the world once mocked, but as a man who had returned home with the sun burning brightly in his eyes. Change begins the moment you change your mind. The world may doubt you, but your inner belief is the real foundation of greatness. Your circumstances can dim your spirit, but they cannot destroy it unless you allow them to. Greatness is not a gift. It is built, one small step at a time. You are always one decision away from rewriting your destiny. Believe in the light within you, and the world will eventually see it too.